Okay, welcome Sophie Oksanen to this conversation, and welcome audience to this conversation with Finnish author Sophie Oksanen. We are at a culture house in Linköping, Sweden. It's called Agora. I'm Kerstin, and I'm a librarian in this culture house.
And I'm Mats Granberg. I'm project leader and producer of this event. Sophie Oksanen was born in 1977, and she released her first novel, Stalin's Cows, in 2003. Her third novel, Purge, was her international breakthrough, and she writes about Estonia and Russia during the Second World War and the Cold War, and the historical and political changes that occurs to people in Estonia and Russia. She is regarded today as one of Europe's greatest writers, contemporary writers, and we're going to talk about her sixth novel, The Dog Park, Hundparken på svenska. And now we should start with 5 quick questions from Kerstin.
Yes, 5 quick questions just to warm up. Here we go. Are you ready?
I am.
Coffee or tea?
Coffee, definitely. I'm a coffee cat.
Apples or apple pie?
Both. I have to have both.
Good. Train ride or car ride?
Perhaps neither. I don't know. I don't have a car, but I did and I don't have even the driver's license, so I don't drive. But I do love road trips if someone else is driving.
Would you rather get a headache or motion sickness?
Motion sickness. I have migraine and I would prefer not to have it.
Understand. All right, last one. Would you rather go to heaven or hell?
That's a tough one. I don't know if you can have the other one without the other one. I mean, how do you know if the heaven is heaven if you don't know what the hell is? And how do you know the hell is hell if you don't know what the heaven is?
That's a great answer. Thank you. Now, I want to start with thanking you for the experience of reading these 3 novels. I read The Dog Park, Norma, and also Baby Jane. And for me as a reader, I have to tell you, I've been stuck in like a long period of feel-good reading. And it was like my brain was craving this feel-good reading, but I was needing something else. And your books, they reminded me that literature can be so much more than, the reading to feel good. It's also reading to get a glimpse of someone's life that I could never have imagined myself. It's like, I could say it's like wanting to go on eating candy, but you need broccoli. And to be clear, I do love broccoli, but you have to fry it up a bit. And so I want to thank you for that. And now a question. My first question is about this title, The Dog Park. When I finished the book, I thought to myself, wow, this is such a great metaphor for for wanting to be in a happy family, an ideal family, or a nuclear family. Do you agree with this, or is it just me thinking?
Well, I guess the interpretations depends on the reader, and the dog park means different things for different people. But the dog is the old symbol for loyalty. So that's why I wanted to have the dog, but also because breeding of the dog is a kind of reference also to the topic of the novel as well. The designer babies and designing the nature, which might not always be the best way or ethical way to deal with your problems. And I guess the quite many people in the novel are also reflecting the vanished hopes on their children or their designer babies. And that might be case also, you know, with children, even though they might not be designer babies.
Yes, and when you look closely at the supposedly happy family in the dog park, you can hear that the boy in particular isn't completely happy. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think he's also approaching the dangerous years of teenage. So that might be also, you know, why he might not be exactly that interested in spending the time with the rest of the family. He's wanting for more independence. But another thing about the dog park itself is that we do have dog parks in Finland and in Nordic countries, but they don't really have dog parks in Ukraine. So in that way, that is the one reason why I wanted to have the dog park as an important scene in the novel. It's also referring to the differences between the countries and, you know, the way we treat our pets and what the pets actually mean to us or how they are seen in the society. That is something that tells quite a lot about the society itself. You know, we can have pets and we can pamper pets, but in a country where the society is not really stable and where you cannot, for example, trust the authorities, pets are not that much pets. You are having guard dogs, and dogs are service dogs, not like, you know, toy poodles, for example. But now they start to have lap dogs, more and more lap dogs as well.
So, I was wondering, the dog park is in Helsinki, as you said, but the main theme of this novel is about surrogacy in the plot, and it's set in Ukraine. What came first? Were you interested in the surrogacy or in writing about Ukraine and the situation there?
Both. Years back, when I was writing my previous novel, Norma, which is a totally different kind of story itself, I came across an interesting detail that started to bother me, and that is the family code of Ukraine. They have unusually liberal fertility law. That is, for example, you can choose or fertility treatment law. And for example, you can choose the gender of your intended child. You can also choose what kind of donor you want to have. And for example, there's no age limit for intended parents. It seemed kind of weird that Ukraine has such a liberal fertility law. And I wanted to know more about it. It started to bother me. And the more I got into the subject itself, the more important it also felt because there's a huge gray area involved. It's definitely an industry, a lucrative industry for businessmen involved. At present, Ukraine is definitely the most popular country if you want to have a white baby with the help from the fertility treatments. And there's a lot of exploitation involved. So I understood that actually through this business I can write about, well, many important ethical problems and women's and children's rights as well, and their future prospect of these rights, but also about the economic gap between Eastern and Western countries.
Yes, because it's a field that you have to ask yourself, and the characters in the novels they have to ask themselves very difficult questions to make this, and they have to make decisions because they are trying to get a better life, and that takes a lot of these questions. But I wonder what made you you explain a little bit, but what made you interested in this industry at first?
Well, the unusually liberal fertility treatment law in Ukraine caught my eye first. And I wanted to know more about it. And the more I investigated the topic, the more important it also felt. And well, I've written about human trafficking before, trafficking of sex workers or forced sex labor. I've written about hair trade as well. And it seems to me that at the same time, when we are also making progress in human rights and equality, there are gray areas and fields where actually we are having a backlash. And it seems also that criminals are always ahead of the law. So they are cunning, they find new business ideas in the fields where the rest of the people and authorities can't even see business opportunities. So it seems like that exploitation of human being is a vicious circle that's not going to end, because the progress we are making, for example, in medicine, is offering more and more opportunities also for the crooked businessmen. Not only, you know, they are not only offering good things for the future. And why I want to write about these matters is that if we are not aware of them, then the authorities and politicians do not care about them. And at present, we are having like hundreds of future Swedish and Finnish citizens that are born through this kind of system. And perhaps, you know, someday they might find out about it, or they might want to know more about it.
Yes. About decisions, I have a question for you about, I think you say Olenka. Is this correct?
Yeah.
Olenka. Olenka, one of the main characters in the dog park. So she works as a coordinator for in the surrogacy business, but she started on the floor as an egg donor, and we understand that before this she had a short career as a model, but it ended before it started because she, as I understood it, she made the wrong decision. She accepted a job as to become a model for what's it called, chestnut puree model, and this made her like appear not as valuable. And so I guess my question is, it got me thinking that we often advise young people like you should take any job, cleaning job, any job just to get started. But maybe this is sometimes bad advice, and maybe she would have had a career as a model if she had like estimated her own value and understood her own value a bit. Do you understand the question?
Yeah. Model industry is a tricky business. It's even trickier than art industry or movie industry. In that way that there are plenty of very, very young people involved, and they don't know their rights. I mean, when you think about, for example, Asian model markets, then already like a girl age of 16 is too old for them. So you cannot expect, you know, teenagers that young to know about agreements, for example, what kind of agreement you make. And that also goes for the fertility business when you think about donors and surrogate mothers, because they are women with no money. That's why they are taking the job. And lawyers are expensive, so you cannot expect them to hire a lawyer to check their agreements. That's also expensive. So these are people with who don't have money to pay for a lawyer, and that's why they are also easy to exploit. And this goes also both for models and for donors and surrogate mothers.
Yes, and it also appears that the donors in the dog park and in real life, I suppose, they often come back as customers because I suppose they their bodies have been like destroyed in a way, so it all comes around. It's made me really sad.
And this is also a novel about corruption. I mean, the relation of the characters in your novel between these young girls, they exploit each other and they corrupt each other's relation, but it's also a story about corruption in society.
Yes, I also wanted to write about corruption. Corruption in Ukraine. And the corruption knows no borders, you know. When we think about the word corruption here in Nordic countries, then it seems a little bit distant. I mean, we might think that, okay, there's a police officer and if you get a fine for speeding, then you don't have to pay and drive off. But corruption is not that simple. Corruption is not that simple if the whole society is corrupt, because it goes to all levels in the society, and it's pretty much impossible to, you know, survive from ordinary everyday tasks without corruption. In Ukraine, for example, healthcare is corrupt, and you cannot, you know, you have to go to a doctor sometimes, and if you build something, if you build your house, everything is corrupt. So that means that people need to get involved. You cannot say like, okay, no to corruption, because then you simply cannot manage your everyday life. So this is something I wanted to write about how it affects the everyday life of ordinary people. And also because I think that it is important to try to imagine the life in a very corrupt society, because if you cannot imagine that, then you don't understand why the path to a democratic system is such a long path. And for example, when the Soviet Union collapsed, I guess everybody was expecting in the Western countries that all these countries will turn into democratic states over the night. But of course that didn't happen. That didn't happen because Soviet Union was already corrupt. So the legacy of Soviet Union is corruption. And the path to a non-corrupt system is a very long road, and that requires a lot of patience from people, and it requires also help from other countries. And that means that we should also say no to corruption and corrupt money coming from Ukraine and Russia, for example. And that is only for the good of the people, because Ukraine would be a very rich country if a small number of people wouldn't have stolen everything. You know, they robbed the riches that could have made it welfare society.
Another question. You're writing a lot about borders in your novels, but there are also a lot of borders metaphorically in your style, and you have different genres in the same book as in the Dog Park. Is this something you strive for, or it's something that you want just coming when you're writing?
I have no idea what's going to happen in the novel when I or when I create the first file. I have some images in my head, some ideas. I mean, like very basic ideas, like, okay, I'm gonna write about surrogacy, for example, but I have no idea what kind of characters I'm gonna have and who are they. So the first draft of the manuscript is the fun part. The fun part in that sense that I'm gonna meet my characters. I'm gonna find out what's going to happen to them. Who's gonna fall in love with who's gonna be happy and who's unhappy. And what kind of people they actually are. So that's the fun part. And then after that, it's all about editing. So, but when I have the characters, then I know that what kind of story they belong to. So I don't make decisions about the genre beforehand. Of course, I know that I'm going to write a novel, or if I'm going to write a play, that's something I do know, but I don't know what kind of story it's going to be.
Because your novels has been read as thrillers sometimes, and sometimes historical novels. So how do you yourself react when you be compared to thriller writers?
I'm afraid people are rather obsessed about thrillers nowadays. And when I say obsessed, is that they cannot make the difference between a thriller, a crime novel, a detective novel, a psychological thriller, literary fiction, compared to literary fiction, because they are different things. And I mean, the suspense itself is one of the oldest literary tools. If you don't have suspense in the novel, then nobody wants to read it, simply. There needs to be suspense. I mean, you want the readers to be involved, you want them to be engaged with the story, you want them to be seduced by the story, and suspense is the basic element of a story. There's different kind of suspense. In that way, suspense and suspenseful elements belong to all literature, but that doesn't make all books thrillers. like, there's crime involved also in crime and punishment, and nobody says that Dostoevsky is a crime author. So crime, even though I do enjoy, of course, good thrillers and crime fiction as well, but it's not my genre. I don't want to be chained to the limits of that genre.
No, and I think that very many readers who read a lot of crime novels doesn't read maybe other kind of novels. But I'm just thinking about how you mix these elements in your text: historical novels, development novels. So this is also about borders, I think, or identities in the characters, because the characters needs to create new identities when they cross borders.
That's actually a very good bridge to the question about the borders. All my characters in the dog park have multiple identities, and the main character, who's also the protagonist, Olenka, she's having also multiple ethnical identities, and she has the migrant identity. Migrant identity be also on multiple layers, because she's born to a Ukrainian-Russian family in Tallinn during the Soviet occupation of Estonia. And then she moves back to, she's not moving back because she was born in Tallinn, but her father wants to move back to his childhood home, which is located in the eastern Ukraine, where at present there's a war going on. And this is, of course, a universal story, a migrant story, the universal migrant story, when children to migrant families, the children might think that the home is the city or the country where they are born, but for parents the home might be something else. And going back home is a weird expression for Olenka, because she hadn't ever visited eastern Ukraine. But after she's going to be a very cosmopolitan person, because she's traveling a lot, and in the end she ends up in Helsinki to escape her past, her haunted past.
Yeah.
Yes. I have a question for you about Norma, if that's okay.
Yep.
Fascinating. About this might be considered a sort of thriller, but mostly my experience as a reader, I thought it fits rather well into magical realism. Would you agree?
All fine by me, but I let the readers to make their own interpretations.
Yes, and the magical ingredient would be Norma's hair, obviously.
Yeah.
And I was so fascinated by the feature that not only does it grows extremely fast, but you added to this magical ingredient by making people smoke her hair. And so there is one person, she's called Helena, and when she smokes it, as I get it, it's a rather destructive, addiction. But when Norma herself smokes her own hair, it becomes like her mind becomes clearer, and there are no side effects, as I get it. And it's also really original. And how did you ever come up with this?
Well, it's not actually that original. You know, the hair is old magic has used human hair, you know, for thousands of years probably. And even I think our grandparents' generation has used the hair magic. So I'm not sure if that's that original. Hair has a power of life, and that's why it's always been like a popular ingredient in different potions. For example, in love potions.
Oh, but there are so many layers to this. Like the hair also, it sort of protects her, and it can also hurt people, and what else? It oozes in dangerous situations, and yeah, I was really intrigued by it. Do you have? Because as I get it, this is the only novel thus far, that where you have like this magical grip. Do you have any more like similar tricks up your sleeve that you might want to use in future novels?
Well, you never know what happens when you start writing, but Norma, I started because I wanted to write the postmodern version of my favorite fairy tale, that is Rapunzel. So the magical elements already existed when I started the novel because I was thinking about the fairy tale Rapunzel. So, so in that way, that was already the starting point. But you shouldn't ever say that you don't write about a certain theme or you're never going to use a certain style, because that's exactly when you wake up one day and you understand that you are actually using these elements or you are writing in this style. So you shouldn't ever say ever. But the dog pass was special to me in that sense that I hadn't written in first person for a very long time, not in a way that the first person narrator would still exist in the published version, because I always write the first version of the novel in first person, and then I change into usually to the third person, but this time I decided to keep the first person because I wanted to keep the only one perspective in the story, and that's something I haven't done actually before in my published novels. I mean, I have written in that way before, but not in my published novels, and that was a nice change for me, and I also wanted to use this method because I wanted to give the readers possibility not to trust her, you know, not to trust what Olenka is saying, but it seems to me that they trust her.
Yes. And in the dog park, there is also a you that is.
Yes.
Olenka refers to a you person. Did you know from the start that you were to add this narrative?
That was actually, yes, I think so. Yeah, it was pretty clear to me that that there is going to be the second person, because it's also a love story, and it's a story of longing, and I started to write Olenka's letters to you, and it didn't end up being an old-fashioned letter novel, but it could have. I mean, I have used letters before in my novels, so I didn't want to have letters as such.
Yeah, well, I have a question also about this one, Baby Jane. I don't know if the cover is the same in Finland. Do you recognize it?
It is.
Yeah,
Yes.
it is. That this is quite different from the other novels that we've mentioned, and I was wondering a bit about employment and the term of the notion of employable people. That's very interesting because this is about two female characters, and they are in love, and they are both depressed, and so they, as I get it, they can't find jobs, or they won't find jobs, and instead they start a business together, selling used or supposedly used underwear, and also used boots, and also sending pictures of, like, there is one description where they are sending pictures of mistreated boots. And I was thinking, this might be a stupid question, but why is it easier for them to start this rather complicated business than to get like a normal day job, would you say?
Well, depressed people usually don't have normal day jobs.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's also a novel about panic disorder, and panic disorder, which is a very common mental problem, it makes the daily job, for example, in service, very difficult. Of course, it depends what on what level your panic disorder is, but if it's very severe, then it is very difficult to have a daily job.
I was thinking about what if you read more of your novels like Purge and When the Doves Disappeared, you see that a theme that is coming back all the time is power and this power struggle, both on personal and political levels. So I think you are very good at to formulate this power struggle on both levels. So do you consider yourself a political writer?
Definitely, of course. All writing is political. How can you avoid it? I mean, even the authors who think they are not political, they are. I mean, the choices you make with your words are creating meanings, and when you're creating meanings, you are definitely political. I know that there are authors who kind of try to escape the responsibility, which I think is a bit boring, because if you have the sword that is the word, then you should make the most of it, you know, make the most of it, of the freedom of expression and freedom of speech, because that is something we authors can do. We have the we are enjoying the highest level of freedom of expression, and if you don't use it to defend, you know, those who have less means or there's less possibilities to do so, then it's a rather pity, isn't it? It's a waste of talent as well. But I mean, the choice of words is always a political decision. Every word is a decision, and if you use, well, for example, already you are creating that you are constructing the gender system of the society when you are making a choices whether the doctor is going to be he or her. Well, in Finnish language we don't have to do that because we don't have genders. We don't have genders, so in that way I don't have to do the decisions, but translators are sometimes doing the decisions for me about the genders. but so everything is political, and the more precise you are, the more political you are. And you know, the precise writing is usually better writing than the vague writing. So in that way, good writing is always political as well.
And in these times, it's no problem to be political, because there's so many issues to address. As you said, about freedom of expressions and other ways. What are you going to do next? Because are you going back to your Estonian quartet, or are you going to write about other parts of former Soviet Union or Eastern Europe?
I do have a new manuscript I'm working on, but I'm not going to say what it is about. But I'm pretty excited about it, of course. What is sad, however, is that I cannot actually travel for research. So that's the downside. One of the multiple downsides of the virus is that I cannot do the research the way I would like to do. Of course, I can, read my materials, but it's not always the same. You don't have to travel all the places you are going to write about, but it does make the difference. For example, it would have been very difficult to understand Ukrainian nature without ever being, without ever visiting Ukraine, because the climate is so different.
Yes. I'm thinking our session is going towards an end, right? I don't have a clock on myself, but I think it is. So I would like to say before we finish that you mentioned that you liked car rides, but going as a passenger, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So I'm offering you, when this whole corona situation is over, if you come over here to Sweden, I'm offering you to be the chauffeur. I'm taking you on a car ride across Sweden. Because I myself,
that would be wonderful.
I got the license this autumn, so I love driving people around. And we also want to thank you. We can't give you any flowers as we normally would have, so you are going to choose a book as a present that we are going to send to you by post. And you will have 3 choices. Swedish authors in Finnish. Now, let's see if I get this right. I'm not going to pronounce this in your language, but the author's name is Karin Smirnoff. Can you see it?
Yes.
Well, anyway, this is realism, historical realism or something. Would you agree, Mats?
Yes.
Yes.
I would agree.
Yes.
I read it in Swedish.
You read it?
Yeah.
Is it good?
I think it was quite good, yes.
Okay. And then
I would recommend it.
All right.
Okay.
And then a thriller with lots of suspense. Katarina Wenstam. Okay, Anna, the technician, is voting for maybe this one.
Okay.
And then the third choice, Feel Good, Simona Arnstedt. My favorite. Okay, I'm going to hold them up again.
Okay, that's a tough tough question. I know that there are plenty of women who love Simona's books, but perhaps Feel Good is not my cup of tea. So I go for the crime or the historical fiction. I haven't read those, but if you have, so perhaps you can make the decision for me.
Maybe you can.
I have only read Smirnoff's novel, so I recommend it to you.
Okay.
I think this is a good choice.
I trust you.
Yes, I think. Then we will send this by post to your home.
Thank you.
I thank you for joining us in this conversation. And I hope to see you again sometime in real life.
Well, I do hope that I can soon travel to Sweden
Yeah.
to meet the Swedish readers. The thing about being an author is that we definitely are used to writing in our own privacy of our own writing den, but fairs and festivals and literary events are very important to us, because then we can actually see the people who are reading our books. So it's very different compared to actor's job, because actor is every time they go on stage, they can actually have and hear and feel the reactions of the audience, but we don't have that. So events are important.
Yeah. So and it's I know that we would like to have you here, and we would like to have a live audience here to meet you directly, but this is the second best. And I thank you for this online event across the Baltic Sea, and hope you're good, and I hope to see you again. Thank you, Sophie.
See you.
And to the audience, thank you for listening.
Thank you.